Turning now to Casey Anthony, sitting just 70 miles away from where the search for little Haley continues in a jail cell, accused of killing her own daughter, Kaylee. Casey Anthony's story, a young single mother who loved to party and failed to call cops when her daughter went missing, is taking on a life of its own. Last night, NBC's Law and Order SVU featured a similar case.
I haven't seen my granddaughter in 4 days. She's only 11 months old.
Does she live with you?
My daughter went to Atlantic City with some girlfriends for the weekend. She's been home for over a day, and I haven't seen my grandbaby since.
And you think your daughter had something to do with her disappearance?
She used my car when she was away. Now, Sierra's gone, and the car smells like a dead body.
Wow. Eerily echoing the frantic 911 call made by Kaylee's grandmother, Cindy Anthony, back in July. Just what are the ramifications of this rip from the headline story? Plus, could there be an explanation for Casey's alleged partying during the month her little girl was lost? First, my expert panel. Back with me, Paul Callan, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, and Dr. Gail Saltz, psychiatrist. Doctor, what kind of effect can this rip from the headline story on television have on a potential jury?
Well, I think quite big. Unfortunately, people get a lot of their information about health, about mental health, and about goings-on in life from television. So it would be great if it were really accurate, but we have no idea what's really going on. And people do listen to these television shows, and either consciously or unconsciously, it gets into their mind. It percolates around, and it can certainly affect the way they would see an outcome.
Last night's Law and Order SVU featured striking resemblances to the Casey Anthony case. The young woman, played by Hilary Duff, by the way, claimed her daughter was kidnapped by the nanny. Listen to this.
You are a liar! You lied! Okay, this is the address that Maria gave me!
Ashley, she's not here. Let's go.
Sierra! This is a setup! Maria stole my baby! She stole my baby! She could be anywhere!
Wow, she blames Maria, the nanny. Sounds a lot like Zanny, the nanny. Paul, networks do have to change the facts, the names, the locations enough so they aren't sued. This episode, obviously based on the Casey Anthony case, but they changed the names, they changed the location. How does that protect them?
Well, Law and Order does this all the time. They tend to snatch a lot of their storylines from real cases. And the law basically is that if you can identify the person that the story is about, if they don't change the details sufficiently that it's clear they're talking about, in this case, Casey Anthony, there can be a defamation suit that can result. So I would have to see this particular episode to see how many changes occurred. Obviously, there's the Atlantic City thing. It's taking place in a different city. So I think Law and Order will have a legitimate defense to a defamation claim here. And they're adept at this, Jane, because they do it all the time.
Now, let's talk about another big issue that's come up in the Casey Anthony case. We're hearing reports, Dr. Saltz, that the defense is going to use this whole notion of ugly coping as a defense and an explanation for Casey Anthony's partying and not calling cops in the month after little Kaylee disappeared. And they're taking a page from another case, apparently, where a military wife went and had breast implants and partied and reportedly had sex with other people and was accused, but ultimately she was freed after spending a couple of years in jail. Do you think it's going to fly with this case?
Ugly coping, Jane, is a made-up term. It is not a DSM diagnosis. There is a DSM diagnosis of complicated grief or bereavement, and so people can have unusual reactions to grief. It is true. Usually we're talking about some sort of psychotic denial that it's happened, or, odd mood changes that don't really fit the typical pattern of grief. But the idea that one goes out partying as an abnormal reaction, that's a pretty far stretch.
I don't know. I'm not going to be able to use ugly coping, as an excuse when I don't want to do something or I do something wrong. Thank you, fantastic panel, for your insights.